Okay, anyway, I'd like to welcome Faye Cossar to today's Raphael's interview. How are you doing, Faye? It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's lovely to meet you too, James. Thanks for asking me.
You're very welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing in astrology at the moment?
Well, I have sort of what I always say is three legs. I have a company that uses astrology for business, for a consultancy company. Most people think that's kind of financial astrology, but I don't do that.
Yeah.
I use it for all sorts of other things. Then I have my private practice for astrology. I've also done therapy training, but I nearly always use astrology for that as well. So that's my private practice. And then I have the Amsterdam School of Astrology. So that's where I have people coming over from other countries. I host other people from different places, and I also run my own workshops and lectures and that sort of thing. So I have those sort of three different areas that I work in, three different groups of people that I deal with, really.
Sounds like you have no time for yourself.
Oh yeah. When you work for yourself, you can arrange that.
Tell us a little bit about how you got this MA in cultural astronomy and astrology.
Well, I saw that. How did that start? I met Nick Campion on a conference at one point, on a business conference, I think, a business astrology conference in London, and he was very enthusiastic about the course, and I'd always wanted to do more study. So I decided to enroll. I was in one of the first classes, and I was in the first batch to graduate. And the reason I did it was because I wanted to really start writing. And I thought if I didn't have somebody that was going to kick my butt and do that and get a deadline, I'd probably never get on with it. So that's one of the reasons I started doing it. And I must say it's one of the best things I've ever done.
Yeah.
The course has changed a lot, I think, since I did it, because I did it when it was still at Bath. It's now moved. And it was a very exciting time to be there when it was all getting going. But it's been really good for me, I must say. Partly because of the subjects I chose to do, or the papers I chose to do, and partly because it was just so stimulating to be talking to other astrologers and other people that were studying. So, I mean, the academic side of it was a bit tough from time to time, but it's a really good discipline, and I'm glad I did that.
Yeah, I mean, how much emphasis is there on astronomy itself?
Well, it's one of the tenets of the organisation is that there's enough astrology being taught in the UK for how to do astrology. So it's an academic discipline. So it studies. Sorry, there's something flying around. It studies how astrology has been used, or the history of astrology. So it's not a practical course. It's looking at what's been written about astrology. It's studying, for instance, astrology with the Bible, or belief systems, or archaeology, and the connection, really, the cultural connections, really, between the sky and how astrology has been used.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of Ptolemy and people like that.
You can choose. No, that's not mine. I'm not a medieval or traditional astrologer, so I didn't do any of that. I mean, we had lectures on that because there's a couple of basic things you have to study. But I actually one of my papers was on past lives. So I studied what astrologers have said since the 70s, basically. And my dissertation was actually on business astrology. I studied organisational development in companies using an astrological model. So it's you can still pretty much choose which focus. It's a bit more. The papers now, I think, are a bit different, but when I did it, you had pretty wide choice of the subjects you could go into.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds really fascinating. I mean, with business astrology, would you, for example, want to work from a chart which reflects the founding of the company?
Yes, that's normally what I do. Yeah. I mean, you can do lots of different things within companies, but from the founding chart, which is the one I normally use, the Chamber of Commerce one, date and midnight usually for here anyway in Holland. You can pretty well do everything that a client can ask you about a company from that chart, I think, and the transits and progressions and all the things you normally use, for people you can use with companies.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much how I use astrology in business. I use it more for strategy and timing and what kind of products might be good. And one of I've also worked together in another organisation. Four of us have got together, and we do a thing called, we've got a sort of how would you say, it's just a group of people that work together, but we call it Structural Stuff. Yeah. And it's for branding. So I do, from the chart, I do colours and images and the kind of look and feel for websites. And the other people are a text writer, a designer, and a web builder.
Yeah.
So it's been really fun doing that. And it works. It's really good. Yeah. My designer is starting to speak astro speak now when we get together.
Good. So, I mean, how did you first get interested in astrology?
Well, I'm from New Zealand, as you can probably hear still. And a long time ago, I had my chart done, and I was always kind of interested in horoscopes. And looking back now, the person who did it was probably only done one course in astrology, but I was still fascinated by what he could tell me. And that was kind of the start of it. And I started doing a correspondence course then, because that was all there was then, way back then. And then I moved to London in the 80s. And my first contact really was doing an evening course, and Sue Tompkins, who a lot of people know, was teaching at the evening class.
Yes, I've interviewed her.
Yeah, so she was great. I mean, she was my first introduction to astrology that wasn't a correspondence course. And that's what got me hooked really. So after that I studied with the faculty, and I lived in London for 2 years. And then when I moved here, I carried on really studying here and doing my own study as most people do. So, I got really hooked when I was in London, I suppose you could say. And it was a great time to be there in the 80s, because there were still lots of people around that were lecturing all the time.
Have you still got your modern textbook of astrology?
Yeah.
The Margaret Home book.
Margaret Home, yeah. Yeah. And of course, Sue's written books since then too, which were useful. But the faculty had lots of other good teachers then too.
Yes, I spoke to Sue, a few months ago. She was great.
Mm.
I mean, how do normal people react when they find out you're an astrologer?
People, I think that changes. I think that to me that depends how comfortable you are with it yourself. I think when you're beginning, you're a bit hesitant, or I was a little bit hesitant to say I was an astrologer, because I thought people would think I was totally nuts. But as you grow into it and as you get more confident, I think that's changed. The reactions change, and certainly since I did the university study, people are fascinated that you can do a university study with astrology in it. So I find people are genuinely interested in what I'm doing. They might be skeptical, but most people are genuinely interested and think it's amazing that I can have a job that's so different. And
it's I'm quite proud to announce it anyway. I mean, it's a great conversation starter anyway.
Yeah.
I say, if someone says, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" I'll say, "Oh, I'm an astrologer," and usually the next line is, "You what?"
Yeah, they go, oh, okay, that's different. And of course, a lot of people still don't know the difference between astronomy and astrology. So, but that's getting less and less. And I'm finding in Holland, actually, a lot of people know their chart, or they don't know their chart, but they might know their ascendant, or they seem, people I come into contact with are pretty open to it. I mean, particularly in business astrology, I think what astrologers need to do is more education, because people really don't know that you can have a chart for a business as well. They understand that you can do it for a person, and some people realise it's a good tool for looking at that. But most people are surprised that you can use it for a company. They don't sort of realise that a company has a birthday as well. So that's the main surprise one that I get these days.
Well, this brings me nicely to the next question. I mean, how do you think it works?
Well, yes. My theory on that is I'm a big fan of Rupert Sheldrake of morphic fields.
I know.
So my theory is that because we've developed a sort of culture around it, and people have looked at the sky for so long that I think we've kind of created something that works as well over a very long period of time. That's part of it, I think. So we have an input, I think, into the field. So what we say and what we do, I think, matters. So that changes. I think each planet, you could say, is a field of information. And as we learn about it and as things change in the heavens, and as astronomers do things, and that field gets altered. So I think that we resonate with that sort of information that's always been around on the planets. So I don't know if that's why it works, but I think, or how it works. But I also don't think there's an influence from the planets, which a lot of people suggest that don't know astrology. I think that we're just part of something that works together. So I think we're just part of a bigger whole. So I don't think there's an influence from any planets or other celestial objects. I mean, there could be, I wouldn't count it out, but I don't think that's why it works.
Has he ever given any detailed opinion on astrology, Sheldrake?
Yes, in fact, he lectured for us when I was at Bath, Sheldrake. And I invited him once to come to Amsterdam, and he said, I'm already in trouble with what I'm saying now, I don't want to go that far. So, but he's quite open to things like that, and I think he would also go with the kind of cultural fields. He talks a lot about morphogenetic fields, which are more about the biological, but he also talks about morphic fields, and in his book he talks more about cultures that we belong to, or we belong to different fields. In fact, one of my papers that I wrote, which is online, is about the Uranus field and about how that changed with the discovery of Uranus and what happened to astrology after that. So that's on Gary Phillipson's website, if anybody's interested in that one. So that's I think Sheldrake would be open to using it in that way. He's certainly open to lots of things.
He refers to collective memory, doesn't he?
He just says it's memory. Yeah, that we resonate mostly with ourselves. That we have a memory that's stored outside the brain, which a lot of scientists don't think that it's a field, and that the things that we've experienced are closest to us. So we resonate mostly with our own memory, and then of the family, and then of the other groups that we belong to.
Yeah, he calls it the habits of nature, doesn't he?
That's right. Yeah, that nature's not fixed, and that that nature also has habits, but it can change as fields can change.
Yeah, there's some great. Have you heard the example with the blue tits?
Yeah.
And there's one with.
And the milk. There's lots of. It gives lots of fun.
I don't know if he mentioned this one. There's one with bell ringing as well.
Is there? I don't know. I can't remember that one.
I think it may have come from somewhere else, but there's a technique called Stedman Bob triples or something like that, and it's some technique of ringing all 7 bells at once, or in some permutation, and they've been all these teams of campanologists have been trying for about 200 years to try and use this technique basically. And then in 1995, someone succeeded in London, and then 2 weeks after, 2 other teams succeeded, but they hadn't been in contact with each other. They didn't ring each other up and say, "This is how you do it." So that's sort of, this memory was passed on amongst bell ringers.
It was discovered at the same time with the influence of the planets. Maybe an idea is ready when it comes, kind of thing. I mean, there's lots of explanations you could give for that. But one of the ways I use it with astrology, the idea of morphic fields, is that I'm always having a bit of a rant about this with astrology, is that I think we have a large input into what happens with the different fields. So, for instance, Pluto, I think, is a young field. It's only since 1930 been discovered. And I think astrologers often say, "Oh, Pluto, you've got a Pluto transit, that's going to be bad." And I think that's then going into the Pluto field. So I think we have a responsibility as astrologers to kind of think and believe and help our clients, if you like, to make that a more positive field in a way, if you understand what I mean. So the benefits of Pluto and Neptune and Saturn and Uranus transits, to make sure that we input into the field the possibilities that they also have.
Yeah.
If that's clear what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, you're sort of alluding to, what we put out there into the world comes back.
Yes, and that we have an influence, I think. We're co-creating all the time. So
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
That's my version of it. So we can also co-create with each other. But I think we can co-create with the planets as well. I think they're also fields.
It's a more advanced way of thinking about positive thinking.
Yeah, well, I think that we have, because we have an input really to everything and all the information around us. So yeah.
I mean, I see you mention also. I mean, I started with I did the faculty course and then I got onto Jung. So and I see I think there's crossover between Jung's collective unconscious and what Sheldrake's talking about. And
he actually says that.
And we seem to have this a lot of material coming out of quantum physics, which is pointing to this underlying reality. And I see you mentioned David Bohm in your paper on Uranus as well. So it's because
I just like that model. I thought that was a good model for why astrology why a horoscope might work as well. But
yeah, I mean it's. Modern physics is becoming very mystical, isn't it?
Well, yes. I mean, one of the jokes that Sheldrake actually made about physics is that they should come out. That physicists, more than biologists, are much more spiritual and believe in all sorts of things that they wouldn't dare mention. So he was saying, well, they should talk to each other because privately they all admit to much more spiritual.
It's like we've got
beliefs and not publicly. It's a bit of the academic world has to be kind of materialistic still. Yeah,
and I think we can get rid of the idea of cause and effects altogether, because I mean you've heard of non-locality now in quantum non-locality. It's something that to me that is like synchronicity, for example. In Jung, it's just everything seems to. Everything's connected to everything else in these disciplines, astrology, physics.
That's right. That's just a different model. They're all just different models of trying to understand the same thing. So that's why people often say to me, "Do you believe in astrology?" And I always say no, because it's like saying, "Do you believe in biology or do you believe in physics or something?" It's a study to me. It's not a belief system.
Yeah.
People actually mean something else when they ask you that. But I do think it's a great model for looking at the world and trying to understand what's going on. That's the way I look at astrology.
I mean, how important is it to be able to use an ephemeris these days? Now that we've got computers everywhere.
Oh yes. I always carry one with me in my handbag. People always laugh because I always have one. And I was with a friend once, and I had my handbag search going through customs, and she said, "Oh my God, you're carrying an ephemeris even when you're traveling." And I thought, well, especially when you're traveling, because I'm not somebody who always has a mobile phone or an iPad or something where you can look things up. And the ephemeris, the yearly one is the one I use, not the great heavy one, of course.
You mean the Raphael's?
Yeah, the one for each year. I always have that with me, and I think it's just a really good format.
I don't know if you've ever had the large multi-year formats, but I think the Ceres was in there with the other asteroids as well.
Yeah, I've got some of the one I've got 3 years in, but it's just handy to have it on. The other time I use my yearly ephemeris, the Raphael's, is when I do quite a lot of election charts for Chamber of Commerce type registration of companies, so people starting their own companies, small companies, and it's just really handy to, rather than having to be sitting behind a screen and playing with things, to just look quickly through the ephemeris and say, okay, when does the sun change size? When does where's the moon? And have a visual image of that. And because most people say, well, I want to set up a company this year or whatever, and I've got their chart in front of me when I'm doing a session. So it's just really a good overview. I think that's the other time I use it. So it would be handy to have Ceres and just Ceres. I don't want all the other ones. And I think she's the only dwarf planet. Why I think she's so important is she's a big archetype. She's a woman, which we don't have enough of in planets, I think. And she's also quite near us, and she's the same status as Pluto. The other ones that are the same dwarf planets are further away, but Ceres is quite near us. So that's, I'm not a big fan of doing lots of other points in the sky, and I think astrologers should first learn the basics of the planets. My motto is kind of simple but deep, so I understand each planet really well. But I do think Ceres has, I think she is really important, and since 2006, even more so. She's been put back in a natural place. So as a kind of planet, so because she was originally. Yeah. So that's my plea for putting it back into, and not any of the other things necessarily. I think the centaurs are really interesting, and I think everything's interesting. But there's too much information. I like getting down to simple things, so you can really go into a theme, or the way I do a lecture is also quite in a way simple, but what I say is deep, because those kind of sessions are really more like what do you want to do with this company, what's your mission, what's your focus, what kind of products. So it's a different kind of thing. And Ceres is about abundance, so one of the things she's about. So also good if you're looking at starting up a company.
Do you have any keywords for Ceres that you could just?
Well, she's such a big archetype. Abundance, of course, in the mythology is one of the things. She's the goddess of the grain, so she is certainly about. I think she's about not liking genetic modification of. She likes pure things, I think. She's a protector of nature. I think she's a.
Is it connected with ecology?
She's a lot bigger than I think than we give her credit for. She's often painted as the sort of great Earth Mother. Yeah. But I think she's more a sort of Saturnian. She's also quite tough. She withdraws, in the myth, she withdraws things when she's not happy. So one of the big things I'm always saying is that we need her because in the mythology she negotiates with Pluto, power, and she negotiates with Jupiter, greed. Right. So she's a very strong. I think she's the wise woman post-menopausal female archetype, really. She's the mother-in-law. She's quite tough, but she's earthy, so she gets things done. She gets a result, So, but her things are things like agriculture and the green movement, but certainly women's movements. You see that since 1850 when she discovered
the interest in organic food.
Yeah, organic food, global warming, global weirding, whatever you want to call it.
Ecology.
She does weather, I think. In the myth, she makes it winter. I think she's got a lot to do with weather. I think she's between Jupiter and Mars. Yeah. So one of the things I think she's about is that Mars is the kind of spark that starts the growth of something. You've got Pluto, maybe the seed, but you've got the Mars that the image of Aries that breaks through the ground at spring that gives the start of something growing. And Jupiter's about growth, and Ceres to me is about the soil. She's about environment. She's epigenetics, I think, is what she's about.
Epigenetics, right?
Yeah, that's one of my takes on her.
So that's
and democracy, certainly about democracy.
Right. Epigenetics is like modern Lamarckism, isn't it?
Well, it's about there's a thing above that it's not just all DNA, that the genes can be turned on and off by the environment, basically. So I think how we treat Ceres and what kind of environment we're in makes a difference, and can also change our genes. So I think she's a major archetype. She seems to be quite. What I've also noticed is she seems to be quite relevant to homeopathy for some reason.
Is it connected mostly to Virgo?
No, I don't think so. I mean, a lot of people do say that. She's definitely earthy. I don't think she's connected to, and a lot of people say Cancer.
Right.
I think Virgo might be one of the best theories that I like on that, is that Virgo's all the asteroids together. That whole, lots of bits and pieces within that. But she was a major archetype, and she's not young. She's an older woman. She's the mother of a teenager in the myth. She's not moony. She's not like the moon. She's not Cancerian. To me, the moon is more about mothers of babies, nurturing and milk and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Ceres is about rites of passage. She's about when the child has to leave home and when the child has to have, when Persephone goes to the underworld and coming to sexual maturity. She's about those rites of passage, I think. I've just written an article, actually, which I'm going to try. It's been published in a Dutch magazine about the different phases of women's lives with that. So I think we need to now go to the end of her life where she works together with her daughter.
Yeah.
She goes through and rants and raves, and a lot of people stop there. I think when they're talking about Ceres with astrology, they look at her being a goddess of grain. But at the end of the myth, she actually teaches, she's the goddess of cultivation and civilization, really. And she wants peace, but only because that provides food. You can stay in one place and grow things. So... but she's definitely, I think, about purity. I mean, if you look at Hitler's chart, and he's got Sun Ceres square. That's when Ceres goes bad, it goes pure that way.
Yeah.
And also Anders Breivik has, the Norwegian guy.
Yeah.
Kill all those people. He's Sun conjunct Ceres. So it's when you don't want any infiltration. Sometimes when it's negative. And Queen Victoria is another good example. She was really tough. She's got Ceres rising. so she's not all Earth mothery, I don't think.
Right. Because this is something, again, that I always ask whilst we're on the subject of dwarf planets. I mean, what is your opinion of all these other discoveries? There are new centaurs, trans-Neptunian objects, and...
Well, I think they're all interesting. I mean, I think the problem with astrology is everything works. All the house systems work, all the planets work, all the extra points work. But my astrology is getting back to basic. I think they're stable. The older planets are you could say a stable field, so they have the most influence, I think, or they're the most interesting to me in any case. I think when something changes, though, in the sky, as above, so below, when something changes, like Ceres getting a different designation, I think that's interesting. And my thing is that she's close to us, so the others are all a lot further away. I mean, I'm sure they mean something, and I think Eris is interesting. You can look at what's happening. Eris as an archetype is new, so she's fairly bloodthirsty and horrible. As we grow into the consciousness of the new archetypes being discovered, I think then we get to use them better. But I think so. The others I think are interesting, but they're not very interesting to me because you get then too much information. I'm a working astrologer that works most with clients, and people can only take on so much, and they don't know the basic things about. You can look at their problems with really basic astrology, I think. I mean, not that but you really need to know what you're doing with the planets. But if you know how to listen, you can. To me, it doesn't matter. My book, which I've written on vocational astrology, is I go with what are you trying to do, and then I don't care how you find it in the chart. But for me personally, I like just really the basic planets. Plus Ceres.
I mean, have you used Chiron much?
Yeah, I mean, I have looked at it, and I think Chiron's very interesting, and I think, and I agree with some people that say if you're going to use one, then you should use the other. In Holland, Nessos and Pholos are being used as well together with Chiron, and I think there's some good people studying those. They're a different order, though. They're not the same. They don't work the same, I don't think. So, but I think they're very interesting, and some of the regression work I've done, I think Chiron is goes over. He's more to do with kind of a different kind of energy that comes through lives, if you like. So he does come up in regression work, I think. Although one of the papers I wrote on past lives, I think everything in the chart is relevant to what you come in with. Whether you believe about whether in past lives or not, it's quite a good model for looking at patterns, I think. So, but Chiron does tend to, there's an immortality, I think that lasts a long time with Chiron and the other centaurs as well. So, but my thing is, if you're going to use one, then you should use the other.
Well, exactly, yes. I mean, I've seen, I've personally looked at Nessus transits with my chart, and it certainly works for me. I mean, how useful have you really found it in your life? I mean, how would you, what kind of claims would you make for it to someone? You see what I'm getting at here?
Yeah, I do, but I think that's different. That depends on why you're doing it, what you're looking, and what your problem is in life. I mean, I think the way I use it is as a kind of mirror to look at what's going on, to try and understand. I'm an Aquarian, I need to understand. Once I understand something, I can kind of move on and deal with it. It's a need to know what's going on. So, and I use it for brainstorming, and I use it for buying presents for people, and I'm a brainstormer really with other people. So as input and as a method of looking at understanding where I am and what's been maybe difficult or easy or whatever in my life, or to look at how I should focus on what I should do next, it's been hugely important. But I think other people use it in different ways, so and that's just as valid. So I think everyone uses, a lot of astrologers use it for looking at their own stuff, but it's very difficult to be objective. But you can still do that. It's a model for looking at life and what's happening. Yeah, it's and understanding. If you look back, I do a lot of looking back and what happened then and research. I love doing research on that. I've just written a piece on. I'm just about to publish my newsletter this time, which is looking at the Israel chart and looking at Jupiter going over all the Leo planets, and a lot of researching of what actually happened when it was on the moon recently. Yeah. When it was on, So again, you can do that in your own life to try and understand the cycles and the patterns and how you might be able to use them more positively. So that's, for me, it's been hugely helpful.
Yeah, Robert Hahn called the birth chart a map of the psyche.
Yeah.
Because it's really a way of, first of all, finding out, who and where we are, and I think eventually the kind of effect that we have on life generally, which is why Saturn is so important, because that shows us how far we can go.
Well, I think everything's important. They're just different, showing different things. But yeah, I mean, Saturn can be really great. I mean, twice when I've got a degree, I've had Saturn on the ascendant. Because you need Saturn to have the discipline to do things like that.
Yeah, sure.
But I mean, I think one of the ways I look at that is, what is the opportunity? When people come, if I've got a transit coming up, how should I use that? What's the opportunity of it? What's the opportunity in it? What should I be working on now? Really, I mean, it's looking at time and what's good to do now. One of the things I say on my business website is right decision, right time. So,
yeah, sure.
It's to do with that. What should you be? What could you be working on now? What's going to work? What's being in tune with the universe, if you like, is more likely to, something's more likely to work when the things are active, if you like.
Yeah. Anyway, we are getting towards the end. Is there anything that you wanted to say in closing?
No, I don't think so. I mean, if people are looking interested in my newsletter, they can subscribe for nothing. It's on my Juxtaposition site, juxtaposition.nl. There's a site they can subscribe. I do what I've called it the monthly planet. So I write a newsletter every month about that. This one I'm just writing now is about Israel. Yeah. So people may be interested in that. I've mentioned the paper that's on Gary's website, Gary Phillipson's website. The book I've mentioned. No, I don't think there's anything else I want to mention. No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed, Faye Cossar. It's been absolutely fascinating. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, James. It's been lovely talking to you too.
You're welcome. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.